Hey everybody, welcome back to the gym. My name is Curtis and this is the Kurt Locker. Today I am very excited to bring you my long-term review on the Exxentric kBox Pro. This is the Gen 5 model that's in front of me, which came out in 2023. Just to get this out of the way right up front, I am in an agreement with Exxentric. Exxentric and I work together to collaborate on this review in exchange for product and no commissions on sales. So there will be no affiliate links or anything down below. All the links down there are just links. Flywheel training is a very niche type of training modality. In my opinion, it's pretty misunderstood by the general population, and that has to do a lot with how we tend to see exercise and how we tend to see periodization. The way that I became familiar with flywheel training was years and years ago when a physical therapist brought me through some flywheel training modality work as I recovered from an injury. And basically from the moment that I touched the apparatus, I knew that I would be hooked. And ever since then, I have been pushing to create content using flywheels. I have used many other brands and I've done reviews in the past. If you check out my channel, you can find those. And I am no rookie when it comes to flywheel training. Now, the reason that I wanted to do a review on the Exxentric kBox Pro is because Team Exxentric is known to have that professional grade, that pro quality flywheel equipment. It's all very fine-tuned. It's got very good social media presence, good photos, and is used by a lot of professional clinics, both in the physical therapy world and in the sports performance world. As I have a channel that very commonly wants the best of whatever is out there, I naturally progressed to working with Exxentric on this review, and I'm very excited to bring it to you today. Now, the kBox, and really any form of flywheel training, aligns really well with my goals when it comes to sports performance, specifically in the sport of strongman and just general strength and conditioning. It gives me a relatively safe way to do progressive overload. It also affords me the opportunity to overload my eccentric portion of the lifts in a novel way that, as far as I can tell right now, is best achieved using flywheel technology. As I mentioned before, flywheel training tends to be a little bit misunderstood by the general population. And as a result of that, there's a lot of, call it mistrust or just lack of understanding in how it's employed. Because of this misunderstanding, a lot of times it can be frustrating. Some people might go off on a limb and they'll get a flywheel trainer and they maybe don't understand how to implement it into their training because it is a little bit different. And maybe they get frustrated or they leave a bad review, or it just looks so weird that there's no way that it could be effective. But I promise you that it can be effective. You just kind of have to change the way that you see progressive overload. Now, I mentioned progressive overload. Normally, when we think about progressive overload, we think of a barbell or dumbbell or some sort of static weight being pulled down to the earth by gravity. That load is progressed by either changing the load on the bar or changing the given rep range. If you change the rep range, you're actually increasing the amount of volume that you do, which is very common in hypertrophy type work. And if you change the load, that tends to be more of your strength base, which helps to increase your ability to produce force against a bigger load. Whichever direction you go with your progressive overload, whether it's increased intensity through increased weight or it's increased volume through increased repetitions, at the end of the day, it's probably a combination of the two, and you slowly go up and up and up until you go through a recovery phase, and then you come back down and hopefully your baseline has improved slightly. Now, this is where the flywheel trainer really comes in handy because it can be used in much the same way. You just got to kind of see it differently. Again, even the brand name Exxentric is telling you what it's made to do. The eccentric portion of the lift, which has been shown in some studies to be the most effective portion of the lift when it comes to damaging muscle tissue so that you can recover and become stronger or increase muscle cross-sectional area. That's where this piece of equipment shines, because where normally you would just fight gravity during the negative or the eccentric portion of the lift, this actually does exert force that is not equivalent to gravity on the lifter during that eccentric portion, which forces you to actually overload that part of your lift, which thereby produces a better training effect in a lot of different ways. The way that it works is really simple. On the front of the device, there's a drive shaft where you load an inertia disc. Sometimes they're called just flywheel discs, inertia plates, whatever they're called. You throw it on the front of it, and then as you pull through the concentric phase, as you're pulling out, you generate kinetic energy inside of that plate. When the strap reaches the end of the pole, it actually reverses directions and continues to wind itself back up because, again, the drive shaft is rotating in the same direction, but when it reaches the end, it's still moving. So it starts to wrap that strap back up and pull it back down the other side. This is what creates that unique training stimulus in the eccentric portion of the lift and what gives a flywheel trainer the magic behind the curtain. Now I have my flywheel trainer, and essentially I'm just gonna kind of talk to you about how it works. You're gonna grab an attachment, you're gonna clip it in to the shackle, which is right here on the kBox, and you're gonna load a flywheel disc on the front. Adjust the height to the end of the desired range of motion. Again, you're going to have a beginning portion, which is going to be when the strap is wound up and closer to the actual drive shaft. And then you're going to have the end range of motion, which is where the webbing is actually at its longest and it is no longer wrapped up on the drive shaft. You're going to kick or push or somehow get the flywheel turning. It's actually really easy to do. And then your first rep or two is going to be basically just getting the entire range of motion moving. Don't worry, these reps don't count, and in most applications you can discount them to include the Exxentric app. We'll get to that later. Now, as you pull, the drive shaft will empty of all the nylon that is wound up on it. And when it reaches the end range, which is going to be the top part of the lift, the disc causes the drive shaft to automatically wind up the nylon like I talked about earlier, which is going to pull you back down. You use your muscles to control this portion of the lift, where normally you would just be fighting against gravity, and if most of us are being honest, we really rush that eccentric portion. And this is what makes it different, because you can actually increase the amount of force that is on the eccentric portion of the lift by simply pulling harder during the concentric phase, or even using kind of cheating motions. One very common part of this cheating motion is when I do bicep curls. If I want to do bicep curls, which I don't do that often, as you can tell, you can start in the very bottom of the lift and you can pull up actually using your legs, which is going to allow you to exert more concentric force onto the flywheel disc. When you get to the top, all of that kinetic energy is still stored in that disc, and as it reverses direction, it's actually pulling down at a much greater force than I would have been able to generate just using my biceps. This is going to increase the training effect and overload that movement as I control it through the end of the range of motion. Now, when you reach the point of the lift closest to the drive shaft, you've successfully slowed the flywheel all the way down because we've resisted it all the way. And this is where you basically start over and you build up new kinetic energy in the plate, which then goes back to the top and to the bottom. Now, here's where the magic is. The progressive overload is still really simple, and it's very comparative to a barbell training. Essentially, the faster or higher velocity that you're able to pull the flywheel, that is going to be a measure of how you're going to progressively overload. So if you pull really fast, you can pull faster and faster using the same inertia disc, and this is going to train your body to be able to move faster underneath the same load and then control it during the eccentric portion. The other way is to actually add more inertia to the system by introducing either a larger flywheel disc or even stacking flywheel discs to get the training effect that you so desire. Even understanding that, though, it can still be really difficult to quantify, which most flywheel trainers, to include the kBox, have successfully built into their platforms. kBoxes, or Team Exxentrics, is called the kMeter. The kMeter communicates with a device, whether it be a tablet or a phone, and it communicates using the Exxentric app. But again, we will cover the Exxentric app as a part of this review in just a minute. The first thing I want to talk about is the actual overall design and then the build quality. These are things that I commonly cover in reviews, and with a price tag that this one has, which again we're going to cover later, you would expect it to be what it is. And what it is a very high quality product, well made, well packaged, and shipped very professionally. As a hardcore equipment nerd, I usually get really excited when any sort of box shows up, whether it's a $100 piece of junk something or a $5,000 really bougie something, but I was especially excited for the kBox Pro because Flywheel Training is one of those modalities that just doesn't get the press that I think it deserves. Just something to keep in mind, my love of Flywheel Training may manifest itself in a little bit of bias. I personally have had amazing success using Flywheel trainers, to include winning America's Strongest Veteran this year in the 220 weight class, as well as Ohio's Strongest Man. And I'm doing that as a 37-year-old dude, which in the sport of strongman, it's not quite old, but let's just say that at Ohio's Strongest Man, some of the guys I beat were pissed off because they got beat by an old guy. One of the reasons that I am so excited is because in 2025, and really in all the years past, the home gym tech revolution has always been kind of always on the horizon. It's the next thing. And I can only hope that Flywheel Training, especially with the technology that's being leveraged to capture and quantify it, is something that is a part of that tech revolution this year. Now, as I alluded to, the whole system came, I think it was in 2 packages. Forgive me, I no longer have the photos. I had to do a big purge on my phone, and apparently my boxes were some of the things that got purged. The unit came, it was very nicely packaged, there was no damage, there wasn't even a scratch. The flywheels themselves were all wrapped up on individual layers of padding. Everything was just well done. I really cannot say any more positive things about it because it was just one of the better shipping experiences I've ever had. And this platform is relatively large, so for it to come completely undamaged in a large box like that says a lot because the carriers tend to not treat those packages as well. Now, I do want to make some observations just right off the bat. So the gripping material that's actually on the top of both the slant board as well as the top of the unit and the foot plate is a really unique material because it affords a lot of grip without being very abrasive. It also cleans out really nicely. I tend to use some 303 cleaner and I'll kind of wipe the dirt off and then brush everything else out. I do have little kids out here, plus this is a functioning wood shop, so it's constantly getting dirty and constantly getting cleaned off. And although it doesn't look brand new, it does clean off really well. The reason that this observation is being made is because so often when it comes to slant boards and grip material, people will just apply like the skateboard grip tape. And the problem with skateboard grip tape is that it tends to do a couple negative things outside of the positive of being really grippy. So one, it's gonna wear down on shoes prematurely, or some people that like to lift barefoot are going to have some discomfort while standing on top of grip tape. It can also serve as a point of abrasion onto skin. So when we pick something like the kBox Pro up and move it around, if it brushes against your skin, it could cause scrapes or cuts. And those are things that, you know, are just a little bit less desirable. But the attention to detail is there, and Exxentric has put on a grip material. It's about 1/16 of an inch thick, and it's just a really nice grip material without being overly abrasive. This note was also noted in Joe Gray over at Gray Matter Lifting's review of the kBox Active, which is also an amazing review to watch with much better camera work than I have. All of the decals that are all over it, so kBox here, Exxentric in the other corner, they're all very professionally installed. They don't have anything that's like scraping off early. So often with stickers, we see that the sticker maybe was applied to dirty steel or a dirty coating, but that is not the case here. Everything is well applied, it looks good. Plus there is laser cut branding and laser cut holes that are completely free of burrs. There's nothing sharp or protruding. Obviously, a lot of attention gets paid to these pieces as they're being manufactured. Additionally, along the bottom, there are cross braces that run and provide the rigidity that this platform needs to be effective, and all of the welds are very nicely done. Everything is notched and welded, so it all fits really beautifully together. Again, a top-notch, more than commercial grade. This is professional grade stuff. You cannot get any better than this. All of the mechanical pieces are nicely encased. underneath. The drive shaft itself is nicely covered and shrouded so that you can't accidentally get things into the drive shaft. Now, you shouldn't be sticking your fingers or anything down into the hole where the webbing feeds in, obviously, but come on, people, that's just common sense. Don't stick your fingers or put your hair where it doesn't belong. Now, this is the Gen 5 kBox Pro. This is the no compromises. This thing weighs 35 pounds. It's made out of steel. It's the largest platform in the kBox line. This is the creme de la creme. This is the biggest, the best, and it's why I wanted it, because I wanted the best one to show you guys. The platform on this is 35 inches long by 22 inches wide. The floor space that it occupies goes all the way out to 39 inches by 25 inches, which is a little bit bigger, but again, you need the legs going out at a slight angle to provide you the stability so that you're safe while you're using this piece of equipment. With this one coming 9 inches off the ground, it's able to accommodate the XL, large, small, medium, and extra small disc available from Exxentric. The kBox Pro also has a built-in kMeter, which is actually below the plate housing here. It has a battery that is installed in it, and that kMeter communicates wirelessly via Bluetooth to a device, as I alluded to earlier. If it's not on when you first start up your app, if you just give it a little bit of a twist, it tends to wake up the device so that you can pair it. And I've never had any issues with pairing. The only time I've ever experienced any sort of hiccup at all is because sometimes I test Android or Apple devices, and mid-workout I have switched between an iPhone and an Android. And when I do that, sometimes it gets a little bit confused, but simply recycling the power on the application, bringing it back up and re-linking has solved the problem every single time. That is not a normal use case for most people. Most people, when they start a workout, they're going to be using the same device to connect to the kMeter, so it's not an issue for any of you. Additionally, on the very bottom, there is a rope carrying handle that makes this thing nice and easy to carry around and comfortable to carry around as well, because I have watched other reviews where, for instance, Joe Gray talked about how this was a little bit cumbersome to move because it requires two hands and you're trying to go through a door. The handle that's on the bottom of the Pro actually makes it very easy to carry with a single hand. And in the other hand, you can either carry the Flywheel disc bag or an attachment, or just manipulate a door without any sort of issues. There are two other versions of the kBox. You have the kBox Lite and the kBox Active, which are both the same size platform. The big difference is in the type of material and how many discs that you can load. The smaller platform is 29 by 17 inches, and it cannot accommodate the XL disc that the Pro can, which is not a deal killer for most because you can stack up discs on that unit. Outside of that, though, the biggest difference is that the kBox Lite and the kBox Active have different loadable shaft areas, where the kBox Active can only take on 2 discs with the standard cap. If you get the advanced cap, you can put an additional disc on there. And then, of course, the kBox Lite comes with the kMeter built in, where the kBox Active does not. Now, the kMeter connects to a device using Bluetooth, and each one of the kMeters is uniquely named so that you make sure that you connect to the correct Flywheel trainer in the event that you have multiple units that are available to pair to. The Bluetooth name is the serial number, and the serial number is indicated with a sticker on the underside of the unit. When you open the application, you create an account, and you can either use email password, or you can sign in with Google or sign in with Apple, if those services are something that you use. Once you are in the application, you can see your training volume in a dashboard at the very top, and a progression chart with your progression, which is one of 3 different metrics called score, average power, and peak power. The first is the Exxentric proprietary score. To crudely summarize the score, I would say that the bigger the disc and the harder you pull, the bigger the score will be. So if you load 4 XL discs, which would be ridiculous, and you pulled really slowly in the concentric phase, which would also make a slow eccentric phase, you might not get as high of a score as you think, especially if you were to load a lighter amount of plates, maybe just a single XL disc, and you pull as fast as you can at a very high velocity, and that may actually produce a larger score. The other two metrics that you can get are average power and peak power, but in my opinion, these do a little bit less of a good job capturing the effort put into the workout. I do recommend using the Exxentric score and essentially not comparing those scores. So if you do a squat, you shouldn't be comparing your Exxentric score in a squat to your Exxentric score doing a one-armed row or doing a bicep curl or a tricep extension. Now the application dashboard, when you log in, it's right below the score. It's going to have some workouts that are available. Now there are two tiers of the Exxentric app. You have the basic, which is free, and then you have the pro, which costs $20 a month. Some of the workouts are limited. They are behind the paywall, and there's a total of 20-something exercises, different workouts, and I'm talking like full-blown guided workouts that are available in this small little section. And below that, there's also a wish list section that offers an opportunity for end users to actually submit ideas, and they can upvote those ideas for development by Exxentric. The training tab brings you to the workouts page and the exercises page. Now the workouts page is the same workouts available on the main page, except for now they're going to be broken down a little bit more accurately. Specifically, they're sorted by full body, lower body, and quick and effective. Now again, the pro subscription is required to access the entire library of workouts. And in my opinion, I think that the pro is a little bit overpriced, given that the $19 monthly only unlocks all 23 workouts, and there haven't been any additions to those workouts in quite a while. We live in a time where subscription paid exercise services offer daily updates or daily classes, and I think that charging a $20 per month premium simply to unlock all of these workouts is a little bit steep, given that there aren't more options available. Now, the gold that is in this product is when you combine the kMeter with just the exercises tab, because this is also free. The Exxentric app comes preloaded with a whole bunch of exercises, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the one that you want to do in that list. In this case, there is a way to add a custom exercise. However, it's not on the exercise tab. It's actually one of the things that I submitted as an idea for the Exxentric team to work on, and that is to move the custom exercise option from the profile menu over to the exercise menu. This would make a more seamless integration of custom exercises, but when you do add a custom exercise, you also have the ability to upload a photo as well as name it, and then it categorizes it by what kind of movement it is. One example of a custom exercise that I added was a good morning. I put on a harness, I clip into the sternum strap of that harness, and I perform a hip hinge good morning. It's actually a very effective movement. It didn't exist in the library, so I went in and I added it. It was very simple. Now, when you go to actually use the kMeter using the Exxentric app, you're going to be in the exercise tab, and you're going to select whatever exercise you want from the drop-down menu, and it will pair with your platform. And after it pairs with your kBox, you will begin the exercise. Now, this is where some customization options can be in place. I mentioned earlier that you might need a rep or two to just get the flywheel moving. The application will actually select either 1 or 2 reps based on user input that it will just discard at the beginning of the set. And then you can even program it to count a certain number of reps, or you can have it count for a certain amount of time, or you can even have it end the set automatically if you aren't able to exert a certain amount of power. Of course, those are advanced settings that you will need to use after you've used it for a while. But the ability to stop a set based on fatigue level is something that is a really cool idea. You can also set it to auto save. You can also set it to auto switch, because the application can actually handle 2 athletes simultaneously, and that is also a very nice feature to have. Additionally, at the very bottom of the exercise tab, you can even turn on the voice assistant, and the voice assistant can count your reps. It can call out how much wattage you put forth in the last repetition, and it can also tell you your average speed. There's a whole bunch of things it can read out to you. I do tend to leave mine on, and I just have it count my reps for me, so I know what rep number that I'm on. When you're actually performing the set, there is a visual display on the application that shows a bar graph, and it shows you the intensity, the speed, that you pull each and every single rep in real time so that you can get that instant feedback in case that's something that you need. Also, once you finish a set, you can either reject a set or you can save a set, and that's going to be based on whether it was a real set or not. The most often used case when I reject a set and I don't save it is when I'm performing flywheel disc changes and the auto start kicks on and it starts to count the repetitions when I'm really just loading a disc. At that point, I just end the set, discard it, and that way it doesn't mess up all the metrics that I've worked so hard to gather. Now, I know that we just talked for a whole lot of time on the Exxentric application, and there's a lot to that Exxentric application, but again, that is what part of what makes the Exxentric ecosystem such a valuable ecosystem, because the ability to get your data so that you can accurately perform progressive overload is a huge part of what makes flywheel training either frustrating or effective, and we want it to be effective. Because of the value of the application though, I will say that if you are going to go the route of getting an Exxentric kBox, I highly recommend that you get the version that has the kMeter built in. This is because that data is just so valuable that if you have the system without it, it will still work just fine, but you're going to be relying on how you feel and not having that external point of view on how you're actually doing. Now let's go back to the platform itself. I mentioned earlier that it is 9.1 inches high, which is aesthetically pleasing without necessarily being too in the way. Now I will say that for most, you're going to have to find a place to store this. I did find some success in storing it off to the side of my rack for a long time, and it basically just lived over here on the side of my rack, and that's where I used it, that's where I stored it, and it worked really well. Since then, I've actually cleared out underneath my log storage area, and I just push the kBox over underneath the logs whenever I'm finished, and that puts it out of the way so that I can deadlift without having an obstacle in my platform. Although the kBox Pro is the biggest one, in my opinion, it's actually not that much bigger than all the rest of them. You're not actually saving all that much space. So when you're debating between the kBox Pro and the kBox Lite, which are the two that I would recommend the most, I would try to have you look and see how much space you're actually saving by going with a small platform, because I think that the real discriminator between which system you get is going to actually be how much money you have to spend at that point in time. Although most people will probably be fine on the kBox Lite, again, I just wanted the Pro because I also tend to make friends with and help train large 300-pound people. Another big perk of having the kBox Pro is that because it's 9 inches tall, you can actually install the XL disc without any sort of height issue. Now, Exxentric did send me some accessories. They sent me, this is the K-Bar, which is a padded deadlift type attachment, which has a max load of 200 kilograms. I also got this anchor point, which basically makes it to where you can widen the area for doing like one-hand rows. And it's a very clever design that just clamps onto the side and has the strap routed through it. I also got this belt from Exxentric, which is a nice low profile, not overly padded, but a very comfortable belt, very effective. It's also got this very convenient handle built into the back of it so that if you are doing coaching, you can actually help guide athletes up and down, which can be handy, especially for some of the more novice athletes out there. I also got these K grips. The versions I got are the kind of foam padded ones. At first, I wasn't a huge fan because they had that foam padding, but I can tell you that both the K bar and the K grips feel comfortable in the hand, and I have been abusing these in my gym, and neither of them really shows any abuse as a result of me throwing them around. Now that is it for the attachments that they sent me, beyond some ankle attachments for doing leg curls, which are nice padded attachments, but those are pretty basic. I want to talk real quick about the shackle that it goes into. Now the shackle is really well designed. It's a proprietary thing that they made. They went away from a sailing type shackle, which is used by other flywheel companies, and went with this proprietary one. And I can say that it actually works really well when you want to clip things in, because it has an auto clip in, and then you actually only have to disengage by pulling on the red tab to unlock an attachment to get it back out. Where this tends to fail a little bit is with certain attachments that I already had in my gym. For instance, the Eclipse grip from Porter Phys Ed doesn't fit on here. Additionally, Joe Gray discovered that his mag style grips don't fit. using just the shackle available from Exxentric. And in order to get those attachments to work, you simply just put a carabiner in between the shackle and your piece, and suddenly you are off to the races. The reason I bring this up is because most people in a home gym setting, or even just any gym setting, they tend to be really particular about the attachments that they like to use. So if you are a big fan of mag grips, having this new proprietary shackle on the Gen 5 model is something that you probably won't like as much. But again, it's really not that big of a deal because it's simply solved by using a carabiner or a D-ring or something on your attachment to make the hole a little bit bigger. Now, the quality of construction when it comes to the mechanical bits, which is essentially just going to be the drive shaft, is actually very, very high. This is a well-made, very low tolerance piece of equipment. In fact, it is so low tolerance that it actually seems to have a little bit of a slowing effect built in. It's not as free moving as other versions that I've used in the market. Because of this, when you load on lighter inertia discs, the system itself seems to have a little bit of friction. And again, I'm not talking about by much because this is still a very effective 5-star system. But all I'm saying is that when you have a small amount of inertia plate loaded, so like a small inertia plate, and you go to pull on it, the amount of energy that the system loses as it just pulls back in is a lot more than other systems that have a much not looser, but much more free spinning drive shaft. There is also an advantage to this because when you want the drive shaft to stop spinning, for instance, at the end of a repetition, or if you're doing isometric holds while you're training by either having a partner hold their foot on it or just having it stop by pushing your toe into it, it does stop relatively quickly using some sort of external brake. This is not the same as other units on the market that require a little bit of extra force in order to get them to brake during this portion of the lift. Actually, changing the inertia disc is really easy. You simply pull out on the retention plug, and the retention plug has a nice O-ring as well as an O-ring on the drive shaft itself, which are going to be what provides the tension in between this coupler and the drive shaft and keeps that inertia disc from spinning all wonky. When you want to put it back on, you simply line up, there's a pin on the inside, you line up that pin with the notch and push it on and let go of the pin, and that's how you load your inertia disc. Hex port on the very front of the drive shaft does have a slight chamfer on it, which helps line up both the adapter to, or the retention tool, as well as the plates themselves, which is a huge plus because it is a hex style shape, and you need to actually line it up so that the inertia disc can bite in and lock down on that drive shaft. The Exxentric discs are all high quality pieces of steel. They come with decals on them. They come in colored and standard. I have the standard. The standard come with the Exxentric branding, which looks really good, applied with a decal, as well as a decal that indicates the size of the plate and then the amount of kilograms per meter squared if you are fancy and do that kind of math while you're exercising. The plates are powder coated, this nice gray color. They're very durable. I've been stacking plates and kind of moving them throughout my gym. They don't always make it back into the case that Exxentric sent with me. There are some kind of minor superficial scratches on the outside, but there's nothing that I would say is like damaged. Everything is just normal wear and tear. And again, I don't necessarily treat all my stuff pretty nicely. Like in the video when I just set it down, if I wasn't making this video, it would probably just get thrown across the platform. Now, as I mentioned earlier, other attachments that I got include the decline board, which is probably the best slant board that I've ever seen on the market. Even if you don't get into flywheel training, I think that this decline board or slant board deserves a lot of credit for its design. It does have two ramped areas with a flat area here. Because of this, you're able to actually put this over the top of something that has, like in this case, a drive shaft that you're trying to pull straight up and down, but it's really nice in a lot of different use cases. And this will be the one that I use and I'm gonna replace my slant board with in the future. I also got this foot block assembly, which is a spring adjustable foot block that latches into the holes that are on the front and the back of the unit. What this primarily gets used for as a foot brace. Usually when I'm doing either like sprint starts, you can do sprint starts with these using a harness where you just kind of begin like out of the blocks, or for doing split squats. You can also use them to do lateral lunges, to have an angled but very solid portion of the platform that you can push off of as hard as you can without it coming off of the platform like it would with the slant board. The slant board is really good for kind of changing your angle, whether you're working around an injury or you're just trying to hit a different part of your leg during, say, a squat. If you want it to be more quad dominant, simply standing on the ramped portion of the slant board can make a big difference for you. Changing the range of motion on the kBox itself is also very simple to do. There's a little button, a red anodized button on the very top of the unit that says press to release. When you press that, there's an auto retractor that is unlocked, and you can either pull slack out or allow slack to go back into that auto retractor, which helps get you to your end range of motion. It's also how I tend to put mine into storage, is I will simply let the auto retractor pull in all of the available slack on the flywheel itself, and that way when I'm moving it around the gym, I don't have the shackle kind of banging around. Now, I have pushed the majority of my accessory training in the past year over to flywheels because I'm so passionate about it. Now, where the kBox specifically tends to excel, so a big pro, is that anything where you're going to be pulling vertically, this is just a super well-refined, super well-made, tight tolerance unit. I think it's actually worth every penny that they're charging for it, especially when you consider what you're actually bringing into your gym. However, because it's so vertically inclined, this also brings up a little bit of a challenge, a con, if you will, and that is that you can't do horizontal-based movements. Horizontal-based movements would be something that you do off, say, a low row or a cable crossover or just a single cable column. This can do single arm rows, but everything has to be kind of bent over, or you have to put a weight, like I put a 100-pound weight on this side of the unit and then I'll pull in that direction. But you're having to kind of make those compromises just because of the inherent design. Exxentric acknowledges this, and they actually have a K pulley that they sell separate from the kBox, and this does those movements in the horizontal plane a lot better. I just kind of wish that they were both in the same unit, but it's not a deal killer by any means. Another pro that has a little bit of a con to it is that the unit is really simple as far as flywheel systems go. There's no tail hanging off where the extra nylon webbing is, nothing like that. Everything is nicely contained. You simply select your disc, load it on the drive shaft, clip in, select your range of motion, and you're off to the races. But Joe over at Grey Matter Lifting also acknowledged that there was a little bit of a problem because the difference between when the end of range of motion, so when it's in the middle of the drive shaft being pulled here, over to here, your center of gravity, or not your center of gravity, but your center of pull is a little bit to the left of the unit itself. Now, when you get to the bottom of that lift and you start to reverse direction coming back up, because it's so wound up in there, that range of motion could be an inch to the left of where it is at the end of range of motion, or it could be an inch to the right, which is a pretty large amount of space that it can be off left or right. Now, one simple solution for this, because left or right can cause maybe some slight imbalances, I really don't think this is a major deal killer, is on the Pro, because the platform is so large, you can actually just stand sideways. And you can do your squat sideways, and although you still have that differential to where it's pulling, you know, an inch to the right and then an inch to the left and then an inch to the right over and over, instead of it being right to left, it's just forward to backward. And when you're performing a belt squat, an inch forward to backward doesn't make as much of a difference as pulling left to right. But again, I just want to state that is not as much of a con. I think that the pro of it being a simple solution, a simple system to use, far outweighs that con, because in my opinion, the amount of imbalances that it could cause is pretty minimal. Now, let's talk a little bit about versatility. So the amount of things that this thing can do is a lot. You can do any sort of vertically loaded movements, whether that is a row, a squat, a deadlift, a high pull, an arm press, a tricep extension. You can actually sit on the platform and do an overhead tricep extension with ease. You can do a ton of stuff with this. You're not really all that limited just because it's oriented in the vertical plane. Another use case for technology like the kBox Pro is going to be people that are looking for a single piece of equipment to be their entire gym, which is a lot of people. And I think that people that are looking at maybe tonals or any sort of mirror all-in-one system, I think you're gonna get much more value out of something like the kBox than you're going to get out of a tonal. You're going to get more longevity. You don't need to permanently mount it anywhere. You can get the smaller unit. It can slide under a bed and come out, or you can find a dedicated workout space, which a lot of people end up doing when they have these built-in products. Now, I've been talking a little bit about price and been keeping it somewhat ambiguous, and that's because I'm not saying that they're overpriced, but they are expensive. So I have the kBox Pro Generation 5, which the base level is gonna run you $2,990. I also have this disc set that came with the bag, and that would cost another $400, and then all of these attachments are kind of on top of that. But to be honest, I'm less concerned with the attachments because the only one that I think that everybody should go buy, and that's whether you are a Flywheel Trainer person or not, is their decline board, because it's probably the best slant board I've ever seen. And that would cost you another $160. Is this a lot of money? Yes. Is this for everybody? Absolutely no, but is it a good value? And that's where I disagree with the majority of people, and I think yes. Now maybe I'm a little bit biased because I got this for free, but I was interested in flywheels, and I have put my own money down and purchased flywheels in the past. So I'm not just talking for the sake of talking. I'm telling you that I have put money into things like this in the past, and I continue to see value as we go into the future. The kBox is an absolutely great value for what you're getting, especially when you consider the application support and the amount of customer support that you get, which is something that we all value very much in this community. Now, I would love to see some stuff worked in. So a lot of people are using AI-based training, whether that's Juggernaut AI, Evolve AI, Base Camp, whatever AI-based stuff you're using, which there's a whole bunch of them out there. Flywheel Training is not actually built in as a part of most of those programs, so you have to add them in as custom exercises, and then the algorithm that's inside of it really doesn't know what to do. So what I do right now is I use Train Heroic, and I do all my own programming, and I have just, instead of calling it an XL disc inside of Train Heroic, I just call it a number 4. That doesn't really capture the intensity of the exercise itself. And in the future, what I'd love to see is an ability to take Exxentric's output number and be able to just have a built-in integration over to these AI sites where maybe we're measuring in watts, because watts are something that you can measure using velocity and weight on a normal barbell lift. So maybe if you're using velocity-based tools, we create an integration into Juggernaut AI or Evolve AI, where it knows how fast you moved a certain load through a range of motion, and it calculates your watts, and then it can do the same thing with flywheel trainers. But all of that is stuff for the future and requires companies to work together to make a really great product. So in conclusion, I highly, highly, highly recommend flywheel trainers, and as a part of recommending flywheel trainers, the kBox, it easily passes the sniff test for being an ultra high quality piece of equipment that I really do think is worth every single penny of $2,990. Now, are people going to just be fighting to get their hands on this piece of equipment? The answer is no. But people are spending a lot of money on other pieces of equipment, and I think that we need to get flywheel training more in the hands of the general public so they can actually feel the training stimulus, because once you feel it, that's when you really start to get the value. I hope this review has been helpful, at least at highlighting an amazing piece of equipment that's available out there. This is the Exxentric kBox Gen 5, the Pro model with all the bells and whistles, and it is 2 thumbs way, way up. If you disagree, tell me why in the comments down below, but that's been it for this video. It's been a doozy. It's been a long one. I appreciate you sticking around, and I'll see you next time.